If you're over 50, you've probably noticed something frustrating. The weight settles differently now. It collects around your middle in a way it never used to, and no matter how you suck it in, that belly seems harder to shift than anything else on your body. And here's the part most people don't realize. That particular fat, the deep belly fat after 50, isn't just a cosmetic annoyance. It's the most dangerous fat your body can carry. But there's also good news buried in the science. And it's this. That same deep fat is surprisingly responsive to one specific change. Not a punishing diet. Not hours in the gym. Just removing one category of food for 30 days. So what actually happens to your belly fat? And to the hidden fat you can't even see? When you quit processed food for a month after 50, the answer is more dramatic than you'd expect, and it starts with understanding why this fat showed up in the first place. And the reason is not simply that you're eating too much. Let's start with what this belly fat actually is, because there are two very different kinds, and the distinction is everything. The fat you can pinch just under your skin is called subcutaneous fat. It's the soft, visible kind, and while it's annoying, it's relatively harmless. But the belly fat that tends to accumulate after 50 is often a different, more sinister type, visceral fat. This is fat stored deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs, your liver, your intestines. You can't pinch it. Sometimes you can't even see much of it from the outside. But it's metabolically active in the worst way. Visceral fat behaves almost like an organ that pumps out inflammatory signals and disrupts your hormones, and it's strongly linked to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and more. This is why a growing waistline after 50 is a genuine health signal, not just a wardrobe problem. And to understand why it accumulates and why processed food is so central, we have to look at what changes in your body after 50. Two big things shift as you cross into your 50s. First, hormones. Changing hormone levels in both men and women after midlife encourage the body to store fat more readily in the abdominal area specifically. It's a real biological redistribution, which is why the belly becomes the trouble spot, even if your habits haven't changed. Second, your metabolism and muscle. You naturally lose muscle with age if you're not actively maintaining it, and muscle is metabolically expensive tissue that burns energy. Less muscle means a slower resting metabolism, so the same meals that once maintained your weight now tip towards storage. Now, layer processed food on top of these changes, and you have the perfect storm. Because ultra-processed foods, the packaged, refined, sugar and refined carb-heavy products that dominate modern diets, interact with this aging metabolism in a uniquely damaging way. And understanding that interaction is the key to why removing them works so well. Here's what processed food does and why it targets your belly specifically. Ultra-processed foods are typically loaded with refined carbohydrates and added sugars, engineered to be eaten quickly and easily in large amounts. When you eat them, they cause rapid, steep spikes in your blood sugar, which trigger big surges of the hormone insulin. Insulin is your body's fat storage signal, and chronically high insulin from a diet of constant blood sugar spikes promotes fat storage, particularly in the abdomen, and over time pushes your cells toward insulin resistance, a key step toward type 2 diabetes. On top of that, these foods drive the chronic inflammation we've talked about, and visceral fat both causes and feeds on that inflammation in a vicious cycle. And because processed foods are engineered to override your natural fullness signals, they're easy to overeat without feeling satisfied. So processed food isn't just empty calories. It's actively instructing your body to store dangerous belly fat through your hormones. which means that removing it doesn't just reduce what you eat. It flips those signals off. And that's where the 30 days get interesting. So let's walk through what happens when you cut processed food for a month. In the first week, the most immediate change is to your blood sugar. Without the constant spikes from refined carbs and sugar, your blood sugar steadies, and your insulin levels, your fat storage signal, begin to fall and stabilize. This is the crucial switch. With insulin lower, your body shifts out of constant fat storage mode and becomes more willing to release and burn stored fat. You'll likely also drop some water weight quickly in these first days because refined carbs and high salt in processed foods cause your body to hold extra water. So some early deflating of bloat is normal and encouraging, though that part isn't fat yet. Many people also notice their energy steadying within the first week or two, free of the sugar roller coaster's crashes. The relentless cravings that processed foods engineer start to quiet down as your blood sugar stabilizes. You're not white-knuckling hunger, you're removing the foods that were manufacturing the cravings in the first place. And as the weeks continue, the deeper change begins. By the second and third week, with insulin consistently lower and inflammation cooling, your body is increasingly able to tap into fat stores. And here's the genuinely good news about visceral fat specifically. That deep, dangerous belly fat is actually more metabolically active and, in many ways, more readily mobilized than the stubborn subcutaneous fat you can pinch. So when you create the right conditions, steady blood sugar, lower insulin, less inflammation, visceral fat often responds and begins to shrink. This is profoundly important because reducing visceral fat is one of the most powerful things you can do for your health after 50, directly lowering your risk for heart disease and diabetes. You might not see dramatic changes in the mirror in just 30 days. Fat loss is gradual, but inside, around your organs, meaningful changes can be underway. And because you've removed inflammatory foods, the chronic inflammation feeding that fat is also cooling, which helps break the vicious cycle. There's also a knock-on benefit that surprises people, and it goes back to your gut. When you quit processed food, you almost always end up eating more whole food in its place. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, nuts, real protein. And that means more fiber, which transforms your gut. The beneficial bacteria in your gut, starved by processed diets, begin to flourish on fiber. And a healthier gut microbiome is itself linked to better weight regulation, lower inflammation, and improved blood sugar control. So removing processed food sets off a virtuous cycle that mirrors, in reverse, the vicious one it was driving. Your digestion improves. The bloating many people carry eases. And your body, no longer fighting a daily flood of sugar, refined carbs, and inflammatory additives, starts to function more like it's supposed to. By the end of the 30 days, the combined effect, steadier blood sugar, lower insulin, cooling inflammation, a healthier gut, shrinking visceral fat, adds up to something real. But it's important to be honest and balanced about what this experiment does and doesn't mean. So let's be clear-eyed about the full picture. Quitting processed food for 30 days is one of the most genuinely beneficial single changes you can make after 50. And the effects on belly fat, blood sugar, and inflammation are real and well supported. But a few honest points. First, 30 days is a start, not a finish. Visceral fat built over years doesn't vanish in a month, and the real magic is in making this a lasting pattern, not a 30-day sprint you rebound from. Second, results vary from person to person, and factors like sleep, stress, movement, and muscle building all matter alongside diet. Managing stress and building muscle are especially powerful for visceral fat after 50. Third, this isn't about a punishing, restrictive crash diet or obsessing over every bite. It's about replacing engineered processed products with satisfying whole foods, which for most people means eating well, not starving. And if you have health conditions or take medications, it's worth talking to your doctor before big dietary changes. None of this is medical advice. It's the science of how processed food and belly fat interact, so you can make informed choices. The point isn't a quick fix. It's understanding why this works, so you can use it for good. So let's pull it all together. The deep belly fat that tends to arrive after 50 isn't just cosmetic. It's visceral fat, the dangerous kind wrapped around your organs, driven by the hormonal and metabolic shifts of age, and supercharged by processed foods' assault of sugar, refined carbs, and inflammation. But that same fat is surprisingly responsive. Quit processed food for 30 days, and you flip the signals. Blood sugar steadies, insulin falls, your body shifts toward burning fat, inflammation cools, your gut heals, and that dangerous visceral fat, more mobile than the fat you can pinch, begins to retreat. The belly that felt impossible to shift was never just about willpower or calories. It was about the hormonal instructions your food was sending, meal after meal. Change the instructions, and your body after 50 is far more capable of changing than you've been led to believe. The power was in the everyday choices all along, and that connects directly to the next piece of the puzzle. We've seen what removing inflammatory processed food does. But what happens when you go a step further and adopt one of the most studied healthy eating patterns in the world, the Mediterranean diet, for 30 days? Specifically, what does it do to the number that matters so much after 50? Your blood pressure? The answer is genuinely striking, and it's the story waiting for you in the video on screen right now.